Let's go to Canberra now and catch up with national politics and the latest move by Labor to do the bidding of the union movement. New laws passed by the Senate give the government special dispensation now when awarding government contracts to discriminate in favour of companies that have done enterprise bargaining deals with the unions. So much for a level playing field, hey? Let's catch up with the Shadow Attorney-General, Michaelia Cash. Thanks for joining us, Michaelia. Tell us what you think the practical impact of these laws will be.
Well, Chris, can you believe it? The government has effectively legalised favouritism, or as some might say, legalised corruption. Prior to yesterday, the government could not discriminate in favour of companies that had entered into enterprise agreements with unions that the Albanese Labor government approved of. Hey, quick! Rush it through the Senate, quick change of the law, no one will know about it. As of today, the Australian Labor Party, the government, have now legalised this government using the taxpayers' dollars when a company has an enterprise agreement with a union. As I said, far from me to say it, but others are well and truly saying it, legalised corruption, Chris. And has that worked out for the Victorian taxpayer in relation to the big build and the CFMEU? The Minerals Council of Australia, they have well and truly belled the cat. They say this could affect up to $50 billion worth of government procurement. Chris, when you actually allocate a taxpayer-funded project, do you know how you allocate it? Best bang for the taxpayer's buck. You don't legalise corruption and hand out those contracts to companies that are doing deals with your union mate.
$50 billion of your money is about to be handed out based on one thing: whether a company plays nice with the right union. Not the best price, not the best result, the right union. And Shadow Attorney-General Michaelia Cash just went on Sky News and called it exactly what she thinks it is: legalised corruption. Quick favour before we get into it. If you're enjoying this content, hit that subscribe button. Shockingly, over 90% of people watching videos like this haven't subscribed yet. It costs nothing, but it means everything to us. Already subscribed? Awesome. Thank you for the support. Now, back to the main event. Remember when government procurement was supposed to be boring? Just paperwork, tenders, best value wins, nobody's Twitter feed catching fire over it. Well, those days are apparently over, because the Albanese government just pushed new laws through the Senate that let the federal government prioritise companies with union enterprise agreements when handing out public contracts. Translation: get cosy with the unions and you jump the queue on taxpayer-funded work. Cash's reaction wasn't supple. Before yesterday, the government legally could not play favourites like this. Now they can, and according to her, they already are. Her words: this lets Labor use taxpayers' dollars to reward companies doing deals with, and I'm quoting her directly here, their union mates. Not exactly a diplomatic turn of phrase, but that's kind of her whole brand. And just when you think that's the spiciest part, she zooms out to Victoria and things get worse.
Yeah, we wait to see what comes of all those allegations in Victoria but with the CFMEU. But, I just highlighted at the top of the program how close the links are, of course, the Labor Party being the political arm of the union movement. All the Labor MPs are members of the union. They have to be members of a union. Now, I remembered that Penny Wong, before she went into politics, was a lawyer for the CFMEU. Well, I noticed on her register of interest today, I checked, she's still a member of the CFMEU. So, I mean, they're thick as thieves here.
Absolutely. And what's worse is, if you were confident that the Australian people would say, absolutely, we want our taxpayer money to be given to companies that have done deals with the union, don't you think the government would have actually allowed us to inquire into this legislation? But instead, what does it do? Dirty deal with the Australian Greens, rushes it through the Senate yesterday under a guillotine, and we had absolutely no ability to scrutinise this legislation. As I said, Australians should just look at Victoria and the state of that, the state that state is actually in, because that's what happens when the CFMEU basically runs your state. And this is a government that now, our friends are the unions, and we will change the laws so that we can actually legally now preference the unions. You have to be kidding me.
Cash points straight at the state's infrastructure sector, arguing Victoria is, in her words, a mess because the CFMEU basically runs the place. Her argument is simple. This isn't some brand new experiment. It's the federal government copy-pasting a pattern we've already watched unfold at state level, just with more zeros attached. And speaking of zeros, the Minerals Council of Australia estimates this could affect up to $50 billion in government contracts. $50 billion, potentially steered not by who does the best job, but by who's got the right membership card. You'd assume something with that many zeros attached would go through months of hearings, expert testimony, maybe a Senate inquiry or two. Nope. Cash says it was rushed through under guillotine, meaning debate got cut off entirely as part of what she calls a dirty deal with the Greens. No inquiry, no real scrutiny. Her line was blunt. That's not democracy, that's backroom politics. Which, agree or disagree, is the kind of soundbite that ends up clipped and reposted a few hundred times by lunchtime. But here's where the interview really goes for the jugular.
Yeah, sometimes to understand how something how outrageous something is, it pays to flip it around and imagine the reaction if you flipped it around. So imagine if a coalition government passed laws so that it could preference companies that were non-unionised, so that it could cut the union companies out of contracts on the basis that it could get things done more efficiently. The country would come to a standstill in national strike action.
Can you imagine the national, and yet not a peep out of the unions because their paymaster, absolutely, the Australian Labor Party, have done exactly what they wanted it. Every Australian should be absolutely petrified about what can now happen, up to $50 billion in procurement contracts. But on what planet does a government effectively legalise political favouritism for its mates? Well, that'd be on planet Albanese, which sadly, that's what we now live in.
Yeah, I've got to tell you about...
And it's a hypothetical that's honestly hard to argue with. Chris Kenny puts it to us straight. Imagine if the coalition tried the reverse, preferencing non-union firms for efficiency. Cash doesn't even pause. She says you'd see national outrage, strikes, uproar from one coast to the other, but flip it in Labor's favour and suddenly it's crickets. Not a peep from the union movement, because in her words, their paymaster just delivered exactly what they wanted. It's the kind of double standard that writes its own headline. Right before wrapping up, there's a quick left turn. Kenny asks about Melissa McIntosh's idea to rebrand the entire Liberal Party. Cash shuts that down almost instantly, saying the real priority is Australians worried about their mortgage, their rent, their groceries, their energy bill, not what colour the party logo should be next.
Your colleague, Melissa McIntosh, went out with what some have called a brain fart yesterday about rebranding the Liberal Party, taking the focus off the government and all the problems and broken promises it's dealing with. Yet she was back out there again today defending this idea. Isn't there someone in the cabinet, in the Liberal Party, who can give her a quiet word and tell her just to leave off on this one and focus on the government?
Angus Taylor has made it very, very clear to each and every one of us, our sole focus must be the Australian people. You know, when Australians sit down for dinner tonight, you and I both know the conversations they'll be having around the kitchen table, the dinner table. How do we pay the mortgage? How do we pay the rent? How do we pay the energy bill? How do we pay the grocery bill? Our focus needs to be on solely putting in place the policies that are going to ensure that we can restore Australian standard of living, which have gone backwards under Labor, and also protect our great way of life. So Angus had made it very, very clear to us, his focus and our focus must be on improving the lives of the Australian people.
Thanks for joining us, Michaelia. I appreciate it, Michaelia.
So here's the real question sitting underneath all of this. Is this genuine institutional corruption dressed up in legislation, or is it just hardball politics that happens to reward Labor's traditional base? Genuinely up for debate, and that's exactly where you come in. This video is based on public commentary and broadcast footage, presented for commentary and analysis purposes. If this breakdown gave you something to think about, drop your take in the comments, and hit subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next, because there's more dropping today. Thanks for watching.